बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम एंड वेलकम टू एमएल वर्ल्ड एकेडमी। आज की इस वीडियो में हम लोग क्लास 9 पाकिस्तान स्टडीज़ के यूनिट 1 जो कि हमारे पास है आइडियोलॉजिकल बेसिस ऑफ पाकिस्तान की कंप्लीट एक्सरसाइज को हम लोग सॉल्व करेंगे। अपने शॉर्ट और लॉन्ग दोनों हम लोग कवर करेंगे। इसके अलावा एमसीक्यूज़ को भी हम लोग डिस्कस करेंगे। तो अपने चलते हैं अपने एक्सरसाइज की तरफ। एक्सरसाइज में सबसे फर्स्ट हमारे पास एमसीक्यूज आते हैं, जिसमें हमारे पास फर्स्ट एमसीक्यूज है द वर्ल्ड आइडियोलॉजी मींस स्टडी ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स, स्टडी ऑफ सोशियोलॉजी, स्टडी ऑफ आइडियाज या स्टडी ऑफ एथिक्स। तो इसका हमारे पास करेक्ट ऑप्शन है सी, स्टडी ऑफ आइडियाज। सेकेंड एमसीक्यूज है हमारे पास विच ऑफ द फॉलोइंग स्टेटमेंट्स इज कंसिस्टेंट विद द रोल ऑफ आइडियोलॉजी। आइडियोलॉजी हैज नो इन्फ्लुएंस ऑन अ कंट्रीज टोटलिटी। आइडियोलॉजी वीकens national cohesion. Ideology can lead to the accomplishment of goals. Ideology does not impact national rights and obligation. तो इसका करेक्ट ऑप्शन भी हमारे पास सी है, आइडियोलॉजी कैन लीड टू दी अकम्पलिशमेंट्स ऑफ गोल्स। थर्ड हमारे पास एमसीक्यूज है व्हाट इज द प्राइमरी पर्पस ऑफ पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी। ए ऑप्शन है हमारे पास टू एस्टैब्लिश इकोनॉमिक प्रोस्पेरिटी इन द सब कॉन्टिनेंट, to create a separate nation for Muslim, to promote foreign influence in the region, to preserve कल्चरल डाइवर्सिटी इन colonial इंडिया। तो इसका करेक्ट ऑप्शन है हमारे पास बी है, टू क्रिएट अ सेपरेट नेशन फॉर मुस्लिम। फोर्थ एमसीक्यूज है हमारे पास व्हाट वाज वन सिग्निफिकेंट कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ इकोनॉमिक इनइक्वालिटी फॉर मुस्लिम्स इन colonial इंडिया। ऑप्शन है हमारे पास इंप्रूव एक्सेस टू एजुकेशन अपॉर्चुनिटीज, increase economic mobility and prosperity, greater representation in administrative and economic institutions, the development of demand for social and economic fairness and पॉलिटिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन। तो इसमें हमारे पास जो करेक्ट ऑप्शन है वो ये लास्ट वाला है जो कि मैंने अभी रीड किया है, द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ डिमांड्स फॉर सोशल एंड इकोनॉमिक फेयरनेस एंड पॉलिटिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन। फाइव एमसीक्यूज है हमारे पास व्हाट कंट्रीब्यूटेड टू द सोशल एंड पॉलिटिकल marginalization of Muslims in British India during the colonial period. A option है हमारे पास the British policy of promoting Indian language and traditions. Most Muslims supported the new British education system. Under representations of Muslim in key positions and political decisions. D option है हमारे पास Hindu support for Urdu as the official language in opposition to Hindi. तो फिफ्थ का हमारे पास करेक्ट ऑप्शन सी है, अंडर रिप्रेजेंटेशन ऑफ मुस्लिम इन की पोजीशंस एंड पॉलिटिकल डिसीजंस। सिक्स है हमारे पास व्हाट फंडामेंटल बिलीव्स and expressions of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah served as the foundation of Pakistani ideology. A option है हमारे पास the importance of ethnic and linguistic diversity, the need for a centralized and authoritarian government, the principles of unity, democracy, minority rights and social justice, the promotion of religious persecution and intolerance। इसका करेक्ट जो हमारे पास ऑप्शन है वो सी है, द प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ यूनिटी, डेमोक्रेसी, माइनॉरिटी राइट्स एंड सोशल जस्टिस। सेवंथ हमारे पास एमसीक्यूज है व्हाट एस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ इलामा इकबाल फिलॉसफी एंड बिलीव्स हैव सिग्निफिकेंट इंपैक्ट ऑन पाकिस्तान फाउंडिंग्स आइडियाज एज डिस्कसेस इन द टेक्स्ट। तो ए ऑप्शन हमारे पास एडवोकेटिंग फॉर मटेरियलिज्म, कैपिटलिज्म एंड इंडिविजुअलिज्म, एम्फसिंग सोशल एंड इकोनॉमिक इनइक्वालिटीज अमंग मुस्लिम, सपोर्टिंग अ स्टैटिक इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ इस्लामिक टीचिंग्स। डी हमारे पास ऑप्शन है प्रमोटिंग द इस्लामिक आइडेंटिटी यूनिट, सेल्फ रियलाइजेशन एंड स्पिरिचुअल रिन्यूअल। तो इसका हमारे पास करेक्ट ऑप्शन ऑप्शन नंबर डी है जो कि मैंने अभी रीड किया। एट ऑप्शन है हमारे पास व्हाट इज द प्राइमरी गोल ऑफ colonialism as described in the text, to control and profit from the resources of the colonialized region, to promote cultural diversity and tolerance in colonialized territories, to improve the economic and social conditions of the colonialized peoples, to encourage self-determination among the colonized population। तो इसमें हमारे पास करेक्ट ऑप्शन है हमारे पास ए वाला। नाइन्थ ऑप्शन है हमारे एमसीक्यूज है हमारे पास व्हाट सिग्निफिकेंट इम्पैक्ट डिड ब्रिटिश colonialism have on the social structure of the Indo-Pakistan subcontinent, enhanced social inequality, reduced rural-urban disparities, limited access to education and jobs, D abolish caste system। तो इसका जो हमारे पास करेक्ट ऑप्शन है वो हमारे पास सी है, लिमिटेड एक्सेस टू एजुकेशन एंड जॉब्स। 10 एमसीक्यूज है हमारे पास व्हाट वाज वन ऑफ द प्राइमरी ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ सईद अहमद खान्स एजुकेशनल इनिशिएटिव्स एज डिस्कस्ड इन द टेक्स्ट, promoting the use of regional language, encouraging scientific and logical thinking, preserving traditional Muslim ways of life, rejecting the importance of English education। तो इसमें करेक्ट ऑप्शन बी है, encouraging scientific and logical thinking। नेक्स्ट हमारे पास एक्सरसाइज के शॉर्ट क्वेश्चन आंसर्स हैं, जिसमें हमारे पास फर्स्ट शॉर्ट क्वेश्चन आंसर है व्हाट इज द फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल ऑफ पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी। सबसे पहले हम लोग हेडिंग देंगे फंडामेंटल प्रिंसिपल ऑफ आइडियोलॉजी इन पाकिस्तान। इसका आंसर है हमारे पास पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी इज डिवाइज्ड फ्रॉम इस्लामिक from Islam. Islamic faith is based on two fundamental principles: Tawheed, oneness of Allah यानी अल्लाह पर यकीन रखना, एंड रिसालत, फाइनलिटी ऑफ प्रॉफिट हज़रत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम यानी हज़रत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम अल्लाह ताला के आखिरी नबी हैं। सेकंड क्वेश्चन है हमारे पास, हाउ डिड द आइडियोलॉजी ऑफ पाकिस्तान इन्फ्लुएंस द कंट्रीज एस्टेब्लिशमेंट। इसका आंसर है हमारे पास, पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी रेफर्स टू द एस्टेब्लिशमेंट ऑफ अ सेपरेट स्टेट इन विच मुस्लिम्स ऑफ द सब कॉन्टिनेंट कैन प्रिजर्व इस्लामिक वैल्यूज and ideas in accordance with the Quran and Sunnah and conduct their lives in accordance with the wonderful principles of Islam. It is the ideological foundation upon which the Muslims of the subcontinent fought for their identity, rights, separate country, and the national welfare. Islam fundamental principles from the basis of Pakistani ideology, which was influenced by the economic and social hardship Muslims in colonial India endured. Third question है हमारा, how did Allama Iqbal's emphasis on individual and group self-awareness aligned with Pakistan's goals for national advancement। इसकी सबसे पहले हम हेडिंग देंगे पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी एंड इलामा इकबाल एंड इलामा मोहम्मद इकबाल। आंसर अपना है, Allama Iqbal is one of the most important personalities in history. His poetry challenged the dominant social conventions. He underlined the value of preserving and advancing the Islamic identity of Muslims in South Asia. He also spoke about the unity of Islam. Iqbal exhorted Muslims to work on their own self-realization and personal growth. He felt that Muslims might overcome socio-economic and political obstacles by promoting both individual and group self-awareness. His emphasis on personal growth is consistent with Pakistan's desire for national advancement। फोर्थ हमारे पास है डिफाइन ब्रिटिश कॉलोनियलिज्म। ब्रिटिश कॉलोनियलिज्म की हेडिंग देंगे हम लोग, द एरा ऑफ डायरेक्ट ब्रिटिश रेगुलेशन ओवर द इंडियन सबकॉन्टिनेंट विच लिस्टेड फ्रॉम 1858 until the independence of India and Pakistan in 1947 is referred to as British colonialism. The entity that assumed control of the subcontinent subsequent to the British East India Company seized the company assets and institute direct governance। फिफ्थ क्वेश्चन है हमारे पास जो कि शॉर्ट हमारा लास्ट है, recognize the significant role of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan as an important reformer of his time। सबसे पहले हेडिंग देंगे significant role of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan as a reformer of his time। आंसर अपना स्टार्ट करते हैं। In the 19th century, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan was a well-known Indian Muslim leader, philosopher, and educator. As a reformer, Sir Syed worked to make a progressive society that could compete with other nations of the world. He was born into a family with a lot of different cultural experiences. However, he was also introduced to Western ideas which had a big impact on his thought, on how he thought. So Sayed up to the scientific set up the scientific society and the Aligarh University to help Muslims become more educated and upon to the new ideas. He also would bring Hindus and Muslims together and close the gap between them. They wanted separate Muslim country and his support for the two-nation theory independence Islamic Iqbal and eventually led to the birth of Pakistan। नेक्स्ट हमारे पास एक्सरसाइज के लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन आंसर स्टार्ट होते हैं, जिसमें हमारे पास फर्स्ट लॉन्ग क्वेश्चन है, What was the situation of the Muslims during British rule? How does it relate to the ideology of Pakistan? सबसे पहले हम लोग हेडिंग देंगे अपने आंसर में, The situation of the Muslims after the War of Independence। From the mid 18th century until 1947, the Indian subcontinent was subjected to British colonial control. Muslims experienced numerous hurdles and disadvantages as a religious minority during British rule. Economic, political, and social differences were among them. Economic disparities की आप लोगों ने heading दे दी है। Common economic goals are also the source of a country's philosophy. The Muslims of the subcontinent had a deterioration in their economic status, notably after 1857. Following the War of Independence in 1857, the British were convinced that the Muslims were the main reasons for the war and they might try it again in the future. As a result, the British were hostile towards Muslims who continued to be economically oppressed and disregarded land ownership, a critical economic resource transferred into the hands of the British and Hindu elites, leaving many Muslims landless and economically deprived. For all these reasons, Muslim commercial and trade opportunities shrank, yet they did not renounce their ideology। नेक्स्ट आप लोगों ने हेडिंग देनी है, हियर आर सम एग्जांपल्स ऑफ इकोनॉमिक इनइक्वालिटी दैट मुस्लिम फेस्ड। सबसे पहले इसमें हमारे पास पॉइंट है, लैंड ओनरशिप वाज अ क्रिटिकल इकोनॉमिक रिसोर्स इन colonial India. However, Muslims experienced considerable discrepancies in land ownership, particularly in places with predominantly agriculture economy. Many Muslims were landless laborers with Hindus or British landlords holding the majority of land. Land ownership disparities resulted in economic inequality। Second point है हमारा, another important element influencing economic prospects was education. During the colonial period, Muslims, particularly those in rural areas, had restricted access to contemporary education. Their inability to compete for skilled occupation and assess economic prospects was hampered by their lack of education, exacerbating economic inequalities. Discrimination in the workplace was pervasive in British India. Many Muslims encountered difficulties in getting government or British controlled occupations. Communal tensions and rioting between Hindus and Muslims interrupt economic activity during such riots. Muslims typically suffered this proportionality with their houses, businesses, and livelihoods being targeted, resulting in economic losses. Muslims frequently lack access to credit and financial resources. Muslims found it difficult to engage in enterprises or agriculture due to discriminatory lending policies and the lack of financial institutions that catered to their requirements. The zamindari system was entailed intermediaries, zamindars collecting tax from peasants on behalf of the British, frequently exploited rural Muslims, increasing Muslim peasants' economic problems. These inequalities shapes Muslim socio-economic condition, contributing to their demands for social and economic fairness as well as their political demands for representation. ये यहाँ पे सारी आप लोगों को एग्जांपल्स दी हुई हैं। आप लोग इसमें से कोई भी जो आप लोगों को इजी लगती हैं, आप लोग उसमें से 3 से 4 पॉइंट्स आप लोग एग्जांपल के अंदर ऐड कर सकते हैं। नेक्स्ट आप लोगों ने जो हेडिंग देनी है वो आप लोगों ने सोशल एंड पॉलिटिकल डिसएम्पावरमेंट की देनी है। वो है हमारे पास द ब्रिटिश एडवोकेटेड अ डिवाइड एंड रूल tactic, taking advantage of religious differences within Indian society. Muslims were frequently politically sidelined and their representation in key administration positions significantly decreased. Some examples of the political marginalization of Muslims during the British colonial period are as under the colonial administration and other communities disregarded or misunderstood Muslim cultural practices and traditions. This exacerbated feelings of cultural isolation and social alienation. Muslim, particularly in religiously charged areas, face social shame, producing more division and discrimination. Following their colonization of the subcontinent, the British instituted a system of education in which the English language was important. The majority of Muslims opposed द न्यू एजुकेशनल सिस्टम। उसके बाद ये सारे पॉइंट्स हैं, इसमें से भी आप लोगों को जो इजी लग रहे हैं आप उसमें से 3 से 4 आप लोग पॉइंट्स कर सकते हैं। मैं नेक्स्ट आप लोगों की ये हेडिंग रीड कर लेता हूँ। ये है हमारे पास रिलेशनशिप ऑफ ब्रिटिश रूल एंड आइडियोलॉजी ऑफ पाकिस्तान। इसमें सबसे फर्स्ट पॉइंट है हमारे पास पाकिस्तानी आइडियोलॉजी अरोज फ्रॉम देयर डिजायर ऑफ साउथ एशियन मुस्लिम पीपल टू maintain their distinctiveness with the Hindu civilization. Muslims felt that Islam and Hinduism are not just two religions but also two social orders of life with distinct cultures. The foundation of Muslim nationhood is not territorial, racial, linguistics, or ethnic. Rather, they are national because they share the same creed. Islam, some distinct fundamentals of Islam as under Islam promotes the intrinsic equality of all people regardless of race, nationality, or socio-economic condition. This principle was opposed by the economic and social disadvantage as Muslims endured in colonial India. Islam promotes social and economic inequality under colonial control. Economic inequalities and political marginalizations of Muslims were considered as violation of this Islamic principle. Islam promotes self-determination and Muslims' right to practice and rule themselves in accordance with their beliefs. The yearning for self-determination was a major driving force behind the demand for a distinct Muslim state. सेकंड हमारे पास लॉन्ग है इवेल्युएट पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी विद रेफरेंस टू द स्टेटमेंट्स ऑफ कायद-ए-आज़म। सबसे पहले हेडिंग देंगे हम लोग पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी विद रेफरेंस टू द स्टेटमेंट ऑफ कायद-ए-आज़म। कायद-ए-आज़म मोहम्मद अली जिन्ना विजन फॉर पाकिस्तान इज रिफ्लेक्टेड इन अ नंबर ऑफ फंडामेंटल बिलीफ्स एंड expressions that serve as the foundation of a Pakistan ideology. The words and deeds of Qaid-e-Azam shed light on a Pakistan original philosophy. सबसे पहले हमारा जो पॉइंट आता है वो टू नेशन थ्योरी है which asserted that Hindus and Muslims in British India were two different nations with distinct religious, cultural, and social identities was something Qaid-e-Azam patiently believed in order to defend the rights and interests of Muslims. This notion served as the foundation for the demand for Pakistan a separate Muslim state. Qaid-e-Azam used the term nation for the Muslims of the subcontinent in February 1935 in the Legislative Assembly. He maintained that a minority is a distinct entity when its religion, culture, race, arts, music, and other factors are combined. Qaid-e-Azam frequently underlined that necessity of Pakistani unity is. He emphasized the need for nation unity in order to overcome Pakistan's diversity of ethnic, linguistic, and cultural groupings. Qaid wanted Pakistan to be a democracy in its true sense. He stressed the significance of the rule of law, representative governance, and a constitution that will protect the liberties and rights of all citizens. Qaid understood the significance of Pakistan's economic growth and prosperity. He held that the well-being of the country and its citizens depended on a robust economy. Qaid stressed that Pakistan will be a country where Muslims, fear of and other religious minorities may practice their beliefs openly and without fear or persecution. He frequently spoke out in favor of minority rights preservation and religious tolerance. On August 11, 1947, in the Constituent Assembly of Pakistan, he explained the concept of the Islamic State as under you are free to go to your worship. You may belong to any religion, caste, or creed, but it will have nothing to do with the business of the state. Qaid emphasizes the values of social justice and equality. He wanted to build a society where everyone had equal opportunities and rights, regardless of background. He spoke out against prejudice based on caste, religion, or creed. Qaid wanted Pakistan to keep cordial ties with other nations based on the ideas of equality and respect for other nations. He aimed to make Pakistan recognized independent and sovereign state in the world. Although Qaid plan for the contemporary democratic and inclusive Pakistan encountered many difficulties over time, it is still a crucial point of reference for comprehending the fundamental principle of Pakistani ideology. Third question है हमारे पास, how did the principle of Islam, particularly the promotion of intrinsic equality and self-determination, influences the demand for a distinct Muslim state in South Asia? सबसे पहले हेडिंग देंगे हम लोग प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ इस्लाम विच इन्फ्लुएंस द डिमांड फॉर अ डिस्टिंक्ट मुस्लिम स्टेट इन साउथ एशिया। नेक्स्ट आप लोग हेडिंग देंगे इस्लाम्स फंडामेंटल वैल्यूज, जिसमें हमारे पास फर्स्ट पॉइंट है पाकिस्तान आइडियोलॉजी अरोज फ्रॉम द डिजायर ऑफ South Asia Muslim people to maintain their distinctness within a Hindu civilization. Muslims felt that Islam and Hinduism are not just two religions but also two social orders of life with distinct cultures. The foundation of Muslim nationhood is not territorial, relational, linguistic, or ethnic. Rather, they are not nation. Rather, they are nation because they share the same creed, Islam, some distinct fundamentals of Islam as under. ये वही पॉइंट्स है जो कि मैंने अभी पीछे आप लोगों को यहाँ पे रीड किए हैं। तो अपने फोर्थ क्वेश्चन पे जाते हैं। तकरीबन सारे वही पॉइंट है जो हम लोग पीछे अभी फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन में अपनी लास्ट हेडिंग जो थी उसके अंदर रीड करके आए हैं। तो फोर्थ क्वेश्चन में मैं रीड करता हूँ, हाउ डिड ब्रिटिश colonialism impact various aspects of life in the Indo-Pak subcontinent? इसका आंसर हमारे पास the era of direct British regulation over the Indian subcontinent, which lasted from 1858 until the independence of India and Pakistan in 1947, is referred to as British colonialism. The entity that assumed control of the subcontinent subsequent to the British East India Company seized the company assets and instituted direct governance. सबसे पहले हमारे पास है impact of the British colonialism. The impact of British colonialism on various aspects of life in the Indo-Pak subcontinent was profound. Where here are some key areas that were influenced: economy. The British colonial rule had a varied impact on the economy of the subcontinent. The British Empire introduced modern transportation and communication systems, established large-scale industrial infrastructure, and developed new markets. However, their economic policies were primarily designed to benefit to benefit the British Empire. For example, India was forced to export raw materials such as cotton, duty, and tea, and import finished goods from Britain. These economic policies heavily affected India's economic growth, leading to stagnation of agriculture and industry. Social structure है हमारे पास, the British colonial rule for had a far-reaching and social effects. They introduced English as the language of colonial administration, higher education, and law. Still, it was limited to a small percentage of the population, leading to limited access to education and jobs. This resulted in significant social inequality and disparity in rural-urban areas. The colonial administration abolished the caste system in some parts of India and introduced reforms related to women's rights and social justice. On the other hand, their policies also lead to economic exploitation, land descriptions, and the exploitation of labor. सॉरी ये वर्ड है हमारे पास लैंड डिस्पोसेशन। थर्ड है हमारे पास पॉलिटिकल सिस्टम। द British colonial rule had a significant impact on the political structure of the subcontinent. Their primary goal was to exploit the resources of India for their benefit, which led to unequal political, social, and economic policies. They introduced the doctrine of divide and rule, which aimed to create divisions within the Indian population, thus making the empire stronger. The political movement emerged. This led to the creation of the Muslim League and the other organization that agitated against Hindus. Eventually, this led to the separation of India and Pakistan in 1947. तो हम लोगों ने एक्सरसाइज कंप्लीट एक्सरसाइज हम लोगों ने सॉल्व कर ली है। नेक्स्ट वीडियो में हम जो मेरी होगी पाकिस्तान स्टडीज के ऊपर वो यूनिट 1 की होगी, लेकिन उसके अंदर हम लोग उर्दू मीडियम के जो नोट्स हैं उसको डिस्कस करेंगे। आज की वीडियो में हम लोगों ने इंग्लिश मीडियम के नोट्स को डिस्कस किए हैं, आने वाली वीडियो में हमारी उर्दू नोट्स के ऊपर होगी। तो मिलते हैं नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। अल्लाह हाफिज़।